Chapter 4 of Hunting for Hidden Gold by Franklin W. Dixon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. A Tale of the West. Next morning the storm still raged, and although its fury had somewhat abated, the snow was still falling so heavily, and the wind was still blowing with such intensity that the boys decided to wait in the shelter of the wrecked cabin in the hope that the blizzard would die down. They were comfortable enough where they were, and after they had eaten breakfast, they even began to enjoy their predicament as an adventure which their school chums would envy. "The worst of it is," commented Chet, "that today is Sunday, and we're not getting out of one day of school, unless," he added hopefully, "the storm keeps up for another couple of days." "I don't think it'll be that bad," Frank laughed. Jadbury Wilson was feeling somewhat more cheerful, although it developed that his bruises and injuries sustained when the house was blown off the cliff were more serious than had been at first apparent. No bones were broken, but he was black and blue in many spots and unable to rise from his cot without pain. However, he was philosophic enough to regard the mishap as part of his lot in life, and it was easily seen that the company of the boys cheered him up immensely. "I've had so much bad luck already," he told them, "that it don't seem like much worse could ever happen to me." "What kind of bad luck?" asked Joe, scenting a story. "All kinds of it," the old man replied. "When I was out in the West in the early days, it looked at one time as if I'd be a regular millionaire, and then my bad luck set in, and it's followed me ever since." "Did you find any mines?" asked Frank. "In Nevada, we did. Me and my two partners, brothers they were by the name of Colson, prospected about for nigh on a year without finding anything. Then, one day, just when our grub was running low and it looked as if we'd have to give up, while I was cutting some firewood for the morning, my axe handle broke and the blade of it went flying about a dozen yards away. When I went over to pick it up, I found it had gone smash against a rock and chipped some of the surface away." "And you found gold?" asked Joe eagerly. "That there little accident uncovered a fine vein of gold, so we started to work it, and we staked our property and was getting along fine when some smooth strangers heard about it and come out to see what we had. Well, with half an eye, they could see we'd made a real find. We was so joyful about it that we didn't try to hide it much, and that's where we made our mistake. You can't trust nobody where gold is concerned." "What happened?" "Those smooth chaps went back to town and got a slick lawyer to work with them, and one night they come out and jumped our claims. Of course we laughed at 'em, for we knew we'd been there first, but we soon found out what we were up against. That lawyer made out that we hadn't registered our claims right, and he dragged out the case until all our money was gone and we couldn't afford to fight it any longer, and the judge gave a decision against us and we lost our mine." "Gosh, that was crooked," remarked Jerry audibly. "Of course it was crooked, but what could we do? We had to pack up and get out. That there mine was later worth millions, although the joke was on the crooks after all, for their lawyer horned in on the property and worked it so that he got most of it in the long run." "What did you and the Colsons do then?" "We was pretty well discouraged. We just hung around town for a while, but later on we packed up and got clean out of Nevada. We didn't want to be near anything that reminded us of how near we'd been to being rich, so we went to Montana." "Prospecting?" "Prospecting, and there we went through all the disappointment of hunting for gold all over again. We managed to get a fellow to grubstake us, and we went out into the mountains and spent almost a whole autumn searching high and low for some good ground, but nary a trace of gold did we find. But just as we was about to give up again, Bill Colson struck it, and we figured that this time we would be able to hold on to it. We had a good block of claims, and off one of them I got a nugget that prospectors told me was one of the biggest ever seen in that part of the country." "Well," continued Wilson, "we took mighty good care that we registered our claims right that time, and we stayed there all winter, and in the spring got down to business. We mined the place ourselves, the three of us. There was a syndicate, made us an offer, but it didn't seem high enough. A fellow named Dawson, who had been prospecting with us for a while in Nevada, showed up at the camp one day, down and out. He had been having hard luck too, and he was broke, so we took him in with us, for he was a good fellow, and he had stood by us when things wasn't going well in Nevada. Our little mine was all right for a while, but after a time it began to peter out. We had 4 bags of gold by that time, some of it in big nuggets, but we didn't know whether to cash in and use the money to buy new machinery and sink a deep shaft or not. We were in our camp one night talking things over and wondering just what to do about it when we heard someone prowling around among the rocks. I went to the door and opened it, and just then I saw a flash in the dark, and then I heard a gun go off. I jumped back into the cabin quick, and I could hear the bullet go plunk into the wood at the side of the door. Next minute there was a regular gunfight underway. A gang of toughs from town had heard about our gold and had come up to rob us. Well, sir, they surrounded our camp half the night, and it looked as if we was out of luck. There was the 4 bags of gold, everything we had in the world, and there was them bandits outside, ready to shoot us if we showed our noses out the door. And our ammunition was given out, too. We knew we didn't have much chance. Finally, Dawson said the only thing to do was for one of us to try and get outside and hide the gold. There was no use hiding it in the cabin, for they'd be sure to find it. He volunteered to try and reach the mine and hide it underground somewhere. So we figured it out and decided that was our only chance. Maybe the bandits might catch him and get the gold, but if we kept it in the cabin, they'd be sure to get it anyway. So we figured we'd better risk it. Dawson had lots of nerve. That's one thing I'll say for him, although I'll never forgive him for what he done afterward. He had nerve, and somehow I could never believe he really meant to double-cross us at the time. We waited until the shooting had died down, and along about 3 o'clock in the morning, when everything was mighty dark, Dawson let himself out the back window. He got out all right, and nobody saw him, and how he ever got through the ring of bandits around the place I never could tell. He had the 4 bags of gold with him, and mighty heavy they were, too. The last we knew, he was creeping across the rocks toward the shaft, and that was the last we ever saw or heard of him. "He ran away?" exclaimed the boys. "He just cleared out, and he was a fellow any of us would have trusted right to the last. But it only goes to show you can't trust nobody when there's $40,000 or $50,000 worth of gold in his hands. We never heard of him again." "What about the bandits?" "After we thought Dawson must have hidden the gold all right, we waited till morning, and then hung a white handkerchief out the window and gave ourselves up. The bandits came swarming in. There was about 10 of them. One of them was only a young chap. Black Pepper, they called him, for his real name was Pepperell. He was only a young chap, but a tougher and more cold-blooded fellow I never hoped to meet. When they searched the cabin and found that Dawson was gone and the gold with him, they was as mad as a nest of hornets. They raved and turned the whole cabin upside down hunting for that gold, but it didn't do them no good. The gold was gone. So finally they went away, and we set out to hunt for Dawson. But he was gone. He wasn't in the mine, although we found footprints down on one of the levels that looked like his, but we couldn't find him anywhere, and there was no gold. Well, even then, we couldn't imagine he'd cleared out on us, and we waited around there for nearly a week, trying to find him and hoping he'd show up sometime. But he never showed up. He had just cleared out. "That was a dirty trick," exclaimed Joe indignantly. "We didn't mind losing the gold so much. It was thinking we'd trusted him so much. He was the last man on earth I'd have thought would do a thing like that. Bill and Jack Colson, my partners, they just wouldn't believe it of him. But after a while we knew we'd never see him, and although we tried to trace him, it was no use. We heard from a prospector a few weeks later that he'd seen Dawson in a mining camp up north, but that was the last we ever heard of him. He'd gone up and called him by name, but Dawson just looked at him kind of funny and said he must be mistaken and that his name wasn't Dawson at all. So I guess that sort of proved he was crooked." And the mine? Asked Frank. It wasn't no good after that. We worked it a few months longer, but it had petered out and the syndicate wouldn't take a chance on it, and we didn't have any money to work it any more, so we abandoned it and went away. We had to split up partnership. I prospected around Montana 5 or 6 years more, but didn't make any more lucky strikes. The last I heard of Jack Colson was he was supposed to be dead, and as for Bill, he sort of gave up prospecting and left the mining camps for good. I've never seen either of them since. I went up on a couple of gold rushes in other parts, but I was always too late. I guess it was just my bad luck. I've never had any good luck since. So finally, I come east, and I've been living up here for the last few months, just making a living as best I could. And now look, he gestured to the interior of the wrecked cabin. Bad luck's still follerin' me. The boys gazed at the old man in silence. His story of misfortune had made a profound impression upon them. Ill luck had certainly pursued him relentlessly. The storm's dying down, said Jadbury Wilson at last. You'll be going back to the city, I guess. But how about you? Asked Frank. I'll just have to stay here and make the best of it. I can build a new cabin, but I'm not going to build it on top of the cliff this time. I'll build it back in the woods where the worst that can happen is having a tree fall on it. But you won't be able to work for a few days yet, Joe pointed out. That's true, admitted the old man. I can't even get up off this cot right now. You'll have to come to town with us. Have you got a sled here that we can draw you in on? I've got a sled, all right, but what's the use? There's no place for me to go when I do get into town. I ain't got no money. You can stay at our place, declared Frank. I know Mother won't mind. You can stay there until you get on your feet again. I'm sure it's mighty good of you, said Wilson gratefully, but I don't like to be intruding on people. The old man's simple independence won the boys' admiration, but Frank and Joe knew it would be impossible to leave him alone in the wrecked cabin in his present condition. It was unthinkable. You'll come with us, Frank said with determination. Let's get the sled ready, fellows. End of chapter 4.